Assalamu alaikum, everyone. My name is Mariam Hussein. I am the Vice President of IMANA. And on behalf of IMANA's Board of Directors, I would like to thank you all very much for joining us this evening. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين. Again, everyone, thank you so much for joining us. As we all know, the months are turning chilly, unfortunately, for some, and we can't help but crave cozying up with some warm comfort food, especially as we try to socially distance. Since food is, alhamdulillah, the single greatest unifier throughout our cultures, our new 4-part virtual series, Food Cultures of the World, brings into your kitchen and hearts recipes that help you build a connection with those halfway around the world. Well, dig out your pots and pans and join us as we continue our 2020 virtual series with Chef Nick Klopp, making baked Kibbeh, and guest speaker Dr. Hamza al-Kateab. Thank you.
Hi everybody, today I'm going to be showing you how to make a baked kibbeh. The first step is to take a little bit of olive oil and put in a small saucepan, just like that, and turn it on to pretty much the lowest heat setting and let that start heating up. While that's going, we'll take a cup of our medium yellow bulgur, put it in a bowl, and cover it with lukewarm water. So you just want to make sure you cover all of the grain. Remember that it will expand, so you want to add more water than you think you'll need. Now we'll just set it to the side, move back to our skillet. Now that this has been heating up, we can run the oil all around it, make sure it's nicely covered. And we'll put in a couple tablespoons of pine nuts. You want to keep a close eye on these, because they will burn very quickly and they are expensive. Once those have been put in, I'll start a timer for 1 hour for my bulgur. Set a timer for 1 hour. Yeah, just occasionally stir your pine nuts. Make sure you're flipping them over and rotating them around so they don't just get blackened on one side. See, these probably still need about a minute. You can see these are starting to get a little bit of color to them, and you're really getting that like nutty scent coming up off the pan now. You can tell they're about to be ready. So these are looking pretty good. I just turned the heat off and I'm stirring them around just a little bit and looking at them. That's just about the shade of brown you want. I'm going to pull them off the heat and lay them on top of a paper towel just so it soaks up all the oil that we cooked them in. You don't want these to continue to cook in all that hot oil. So I'll lay them on a paper towel. Just spread them out a little bit so they can dry. Yes, they are really hot, so you don't want to just grab them if you're not used to it. There we go. We'll set those to the side and come back to them when we're halfway through our filling. The next step is making our filling. You're going to start by taking a slightly larger saucepan, doing the same thing, covering the bottom in oil, getting some good heat in there. You know, you're not going to oversaturate anything. We'll add in 1 chopped onion. I know I have 2 in here, so I'm going to add in about half of the mix. Next, just let this sit for a second, get some heat in it, and we're just going to lightly brown the onion before we add in our spices. Just make sure it's evenly spread out. I'll step away and come back to that in a second. Alright, now we can see that these onions are starting to get a little bit of color into them, but really it's that fragrance of, you know, just sauteing onions that lets you know you're about ready to add in all your spices. We're going to do a teaspoon of cinnamon and a teaspoon and a half of cumin, a teaspoon and a half of paprika, a teaspoon and a half of salt. At this point too, you'll want to add in about a tablespoon of minced garlic. And just give this a nice mix, make sure everything's mixed together well. At this point, I find it usually helps to add in a little bit of oil too. And once we get this mixed, we'll just let it simmer for about another 30 seconds. Now, once that's mixed together real nicely, we'll step to the side just for a second. Take a pound of our 95% lean ground beef. And it does help if you buy this from a local butcher to have him run it through the grinder a couple times just so you get a super fine, texture. We'll just go ahead and plop the whole thing in here. Start breaking it up and mixing it all around. You want this meat to have a similar texture to taco meat, so you really need to break everything up well as you're mixing it, and continue to do so as it cooks. And I'm just going to continue working it and breaking it up till it's about halfway brown. Now you can see that our ground beef is about halfway done. At this point, we'll add in our toasted pine nuts from earlier. And also a couple of tablespoons of chopped parsley. Again, we'll just mix this up and continue to cook it. It's a good thing to remember to not have your heat up too high. No, it's not a race to get the filling done. And you don't want to be pressured, by stuff cooking too quick either. Alrighty guys, now we can see that our filling is just about all the way cooked. You don't have to get every single bit of red out of it because we will be baking this. We're just mostly done is a good benchmark. Go ahead and just take it off the heat. Then I'll go ahead and just set it to the side. It is important not to cover it. You want it to be able to cool. Alright, here's our timer for the bulgur. Go ahead and shut that off and move over to strain it. So, come over the sink, pour the bulgur to a nice little strainer. You really want to use a half strainer like this and not a colander. Most colanders, the holes are too big and your grain will fall through. And I'll give it a couple little shakes. And set it in the bowl so it can continue to drain while we start making the top and bottom layer of our baked kibbeh. The next step in making our baked kibbeh is to start with the top and bottom layers. To do this, we're going to take the other onion that we diced up earlier and put it in our food processor. With that, add a little bit of salt, a couple teaspoons, and about a teaspoon and a half of garlic. At this point, I just want to pulse it a little bit, just to get the mixture beginning to at this point, I'll take a spatula and run it around the side. Another few quick pulses, we're ready to move on to the bulgur. Continue to drain this over the sink a little bit. Just kind of push down on the strainer in order to get any remaining water out. You do want this to be pretty dry. It doesn't have to be completely dry, but as dry as you can get it. Any moisture left in it will bubble and boil off when you bake it, but it'll deform the sides of your kibbeh. And this is about good right here. We'll add that mix into our onion. And again, we'll just pulse it a couple times. Make sure we always run our spatula around the side of the food processor. Don't want to forget about any of it. You can see now our mix isn't completely homogeneous, but it's starting to get there. So at this point, we'll go ahead and add in our beef. You want to use the leanest meat you can. So I would suggest 95% lean or leaner. I'll add in 1 pound here. And our other pound. And again, I'll start by pulsing it, but eventually I'll just turn the processor on and let it go. You really want to mix this up really well so you can make almost like a dough with it. But you're not going to over mix it. This will take 4 or 5 minutes. I'm just repositioning my beef and bulgur mix to make sure it all gets blended evenly. We're about halfway through. We'll go for another few minutes here now. Alright. Now we get to the fun part of our baked kibbeh, assembling it. Okay, baking tray. Some softened butter. Just rub it all along the tray. Usually if you let your stick of butter sit out for 45 minutes or an hour, it'll be perfect for this. You don't want it melted. You just want it soft enough to coat the side of the pan. Okay, that's about good like that. Now we'll start with our first layer of the kibbeh. Take our meat and bulgur mix, apply it to the bottom of our baking pan. You want to use about half of your mixture, so be conscious of that so you don't use it all up on the bottom and not have enough to cover the filling. And again, make sure we're pushing it out all the way to the sides of the pan. That looks pretty good. I'll take our filling, we set to the side earlier. You can pour it, but I like to use my hands just so I can evenly distribute it. And the filling is what's going to give your kibbeh the most of its flavor. So you want to make sure you get this all around. You know, you can layer it on there pretty thick. Alright, before you put your top layer on, I always recommend pulling your blade out of your food processor, just so you don't reach in there and end up slicing a finger off. Now, let's take some handfuls and apply our top layer. Next, I like to take a spatula, smooth the top over, just so it looks better as it comes out of the oven. Next, just sprinkle a little bit of salt on top. For this, it's better to use coarse rock salt instead of table salt. Want some bigger pieces. We'll pick it up and come over to the oven that we've preheated to 350 degrees and pop it right in. You'll want to set a timer for about 25 minutes. So halfway through baking, you can pull it out, turn it around, and score it. All right, we've hit about 25 minutes on our baked kibbeh. Pull it out, turn it around, go ahead and score it real quick. Remember what I said about the moisture in the grain earlier though? If you see down here, as it baked, there was moisture in the bottom. And as that bubbled off, our bottom and top layers actually shrunk. And that's what caused this separation along the edges here. This is just another reason why you want to get as much moisture as possible out of the bulgur before you add it to the mix. It's important to remember too, when you are scoring this, to not cut more than maybe half an inch into it. You do not want to go all the way through. This will just give it a nice pattern when it comes out. There you go. Now that that's done and we've turned it around, go ahead and put it back in the oven for another 20 minutes and we'll be set. So after our second 20 minutes of cooking, kibbeh should be about done. Here we go. Set it over here. We'll just garnish it with a little bit of freshly chopped parsley. There you have it. Baked kibbeh.
Assalamu alaikum everyone. My name is Dr. Ismail Meher. I'm humbled to be with you guys tonight. Greetings to everyone who's tuned in on Facebook Live and on YouTube. I'm a board member of the Islamic Medical Association North America, and also I'm the chairman for IMANA Medical Relief. And today we're going to talk about some of the work that we're doing around the world, and soon thereafter we're going to have Dr. Hamza al-Kateab who's from Syria, who was in the Oscar-nominated documentary for Sama. But before we get to Dr. Hamza, I wanted to share with you some of the work that IMANA has been doing specifically for Syrian refugees and those afflicted by conflict and famine and lack of access to healthcare around the world. We all just celebrated Thanksgiving, and we were so thankful for so much that we have as Americans here in the United States. I've been humbled and privileged to have traveled to over 24 different medical missions and surgical missions around the world. So I'm really able to reflect on how thankful we really are, where we have access to healthcare, we have access to surgery, medications, and whatnot. In our work in the over 34 countries, we've provided healthcare to 2.5 million patients. We've hosted over 155 medical and surgical missions around the world. IMANA has constructed 30-some odd hospitals and clinics around the world. We've been present in our domestic response whenever there's a catastrophe such as a hurricane or tornadoes here in the United States. Our teams are first and foremost to respond. During the COVID response, we distributed over 50,000 N95 masks to our fellow healthcare workers around the country. And all this is because of you, the donors and those who are watching and those who are supporting our work. And without your support, we're not able to achieve this. In Syria, which we're focusing on today, we've been present since 2016. We've been traveling to Jordan and hosting medical missions. Over almost 30,000 patients have been treated, Syrian refugees. And Dr. Hamza was going to share with you the struggle and challenges that is faced by the Syrian refugees all around the world, and what he experienced firsthand as a physician in Aleppo and then as a refugee. Your work helps us, your donations help us achieve this work around the world. I'm going to move into a little video about the work that IMANA has done. Please feel free to shoot an email to us at IMANA if you have any questions, and if you're ready to help us and support us, to be truly show how thankful you are for what you have is by taking some action, and action is by supporting an organization that's truly making a difference in people's lives. You can text to 44321, go to www.imana.org, make your donations today, and we'll share this video with you now.
The Islamic Medical Association of North America is a professional association of Muslim physicians. IMANA Medical Relief, also known as IMR, is the humanitarian division of IMANA. It is dedicated to saving lives and relieving suffering through disaster relief, humanitarian aid, and medical missions.
IMR is a great platform for Muslim and non-Muslim physicians and allied healthcare professionals.
Join IMANA today and become a part of our growing family that aims to foster future leaders for an overall better healthcare system.
Thank you, Dr. Meher. So now it is my great pleasure to introduce a preview of the multi-award-winning documentary For Sama. It documents life, love, and family under siege during the Syrian conflict.
سما سما مرحبا يا ماما صباح الخير شو في ضرب كتير اليوم وإذا بس ما ضربنا نحن حبيبي ولك سما نو No. No. سما الأمور صارت كتير سيئة هلأ أبوكي مداوم كل الوقت بالمشفى لهيك نحن عايشين هون هلأ هاي غرفتنا هدول اللوحات مخبين وراهن الدشم يلي بيحمونا من القصف نعم روحي عم نعمل جهدنا لنحس كأنه بيتنا شو ببلش هلا؟
مروة إبراهيم عملوا عليك رواز رهيب، مروة إبراهيم عملوا رواز رهيب.
في إسعاف لازم أنزل لتحت باي
Oh, wow. Assalamu alaikum. Blessings again, everyone. Quite moving to see that trailer. Hopefully many of you watched For Sama. I've watched it multiple times, and every time I see it, it's gut-wrenching and so moving. And here at IMANA, we've taken care of so many of those refugees who have fled Aleppo and fled those areas under siege in Syria. I'm honored, I'm humbled to be introducing tonight's guest of honor, our main speaker, Dr. Hamza al-Kateab. He's by training a pediatrician. He's a physician, a political activist, and an advocate for public health and for healthcare. Him and his wife were featured. His wife actually produced and directed For Sama. With raw footage that just grips at your heart every time that I've watched For Sama. Wada has documented the time that they spent in Aleppo, living in a hospital besieged by Syrian forces, living day to day, not knowing if they would live hour to hour. Day to day, it might be pushing it at times. The family is now in London. They had to flee at the end, something that they did not want to do, but had no choice. And they still advocate for the Syrian cause and for their brothers and sisters around the world who have been displaced by this. And without further ado, Dr. Hamza, welcome.
Welcome, and thank you for this introduction. Like, I was really glad when you mentioned like they were forced to flee something that they didn't want to do, because that like represent a lot of the cases of refugees. We always say in every like talk we deal with that no one dreams to become a refugee, no one wants to become a refugee, and all this like 6 million refugees, Syrian refugees, they were like forced to flee Syria. It wasn't kind of like they were kind of also lucky that they survived, and that like yes they are privileged because they are alive, but it's not like something that they are living their dream, like their dreams.
No, absolutely. First and foremost, I need to ask you, how's Wad and Sama and your the newborn that was born? Your wife was actually pregnant towards the end. Daima, how are they doing?
So they're all good. Sama now is at like reception school, preschool. Taima starting the nursery. They're both like we're here like all together in London, and they start to get this weird British accent that we're like a little bit worried about. And Wad is now working with Channel 4 News, and she's also doing a master in media and media communication and development. And I'm also doing a master at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine at the moment.
Excellent.
So we're coping
so,
well,
you know,
and hopefully.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So, you know, Dr. Hamza, like I had shared, you know, I've been honored and humbled to have traveled to many countries. I was in Gaza during the war. You know, a different conflict, but I've experienced some of this conflict, and many of our volunteer physicians at IMANA have been in situations similar to yours, but not to that extent. And having interacted with many refugees and displaced persons and people who have been affected by you know, catastrophe. I remember when I was in Jordan, in Amman, taking care of Syrian refugees, the one word that always came to me, if you were to ask me to describe the Syrian people, it was resilience. It was resilience. If you had to summarize what it was or what it is to be a Syrian refugee who is now a guest in a different country, it was the resilience. And if you had to describe yourself and your brothers and sisters, what word would you choose?
I guess I will completely agree with you on like the only word and like the most the main word that will describe the Syrian refugees both in and outside Syria are, like, is resilience. It's like what everyone had to go through, and then to end in a country or in a camp like inside Syria near the border, or in all over like Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey, all over also. Like I guess there is not a single country in the world that is not hosting some Syrians refugee like after the revolution in 2011, and like each one of those people has his or her own story. Each one of them has lost dreams, has lost like lost hopes, has lost friends or like family members, and the fact that they are still kind of fighting their way in this life. Most of them are still fighting this for accountability. Is I guess there are like hundreds of research has done on the Syrian conflicts and the Syrian refugees, and it's really like worth like because the resilience that the Syrian people had, and the fact that they still dream of like one day accountability might happen, one day justice might happen, and then they hopefully return back to Syria is something like just amazing.
So, you know, you mentioned refugees in so many different countries. I mean, like you said, there's not a country in the world that there is not a refugee of from Syria. You know, I know you're studying public health, looking to get your master's in that. And what I often have seen in my travels has been that food, shelter, clothing, there's so many organizations and great people who try to meet those needs. And those needs are never met, but there's people trying to do that. But healthcare is something that is so often forgotten. And that was a motivation, I believe, for you to, you were fresh out of training and you established, I think for those who haven't watched the documentary, Dr. Hamza established a hospital, Al-Quds Hospital, all by himself, a makeshift hospital that was doing everything and anything imaginable to try to save lives. So where does healthcare come into play for Syrian refugees, for those still inside Syria, but more so for the refugees outside? Because they don't have the access that I do or our viewers do here in America, where you walk in, show your insurance card, and you get a CAT scan and you get treated. Could you touch upon that?
Yeah, I actually, as you said, like there are so many things that most of the people in the world take for, and unfortunately, like it's not the case for many of Syrians, for at least like more or less like 12 million Syrian, although like inside and outside of Syria. So inside Syria, like and it has different like reasons. So inside Syria, they don't have access to healthcare, even though that most of healthcare services are provided free in Syria, in the non-government control area. But yet, because of the continuous and deliberate attacks by the Syrian regime and the Russian on the health facilities, everyone basically in Syria afraid to go to hospital or to clinics. When I was in Aleppo, I had like, when we need like to admit like a patient for a couple of days for hospitalization, they usually freak out. They just like, no, I can't stay at the hospital for 3 or 4 days. Can you just give me the IV drugs and I'll take them at home? And he's willing or she's willing to not taking the medication because it's more like it's less risk than being at the hospital for 3 or 4 days when they know that it's a continuous target by the dictatorship regime and the allies, the Russian. While outside of Syria, for also a lot of refugees, they don't have the basic rights regarding like access to healthcare. So for example, like here in the UK, I'm a refugee now in the UK. I know that I have my like decision to like for 5 years leave to remain here in the UK, which I have free access to healthcare and access to like public funds to education, etc. While in a lot of countries, especially countries surrounding Syria, you don't have like the refugees there don't have this status. They don't have a refugee status, which basically then they don't have the rights of those refugees. And despite like the incredible works that like INGOs and NGOs like IMANA are doing, but it's still like there is a huge gap that need to be filled. Like every couple of days or couple of weeks, we hear about a hospital in a country that refused to admit like a Syrian refugee or a Syrian like pregnant woman because they don't have any kind of insurance and they don't have enough like money to pay for private healthcare. Especially that in a lot of like, especially in Middle East, most of healthcare is usually like fees for services, so they don't have this like wide insurance coverage or like public insurance coverage. Usually, like even the citizens of those countries usually just like pay out of their pockets for health services, and refugees, of course, don't have this options, since in the first place they are struggling to have the right to work in this country that they are at. It's similar like we were shocked by like in the camps in Greece. So this is like a country in Europe, and yet people were living in camps for years. We've met Syrians like and also from other nationalities, Iraqis, Afghanis. They've been in those camps for a year and two, and they're waiting for a decision through all these 2 years, they don't have the right to work, they don't have the right to access healthcare. So it's just like frustrating to see that happen. And as I said, it's not only in a country like in the Middle East, but it's also in for example Greece, which is part of the European Union.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, my experience that I saw was that, you mentioned the Middle East countries, and I've been both to Lebanon and I've been to Jordan. Sometimes people don't realize is, the countries are dealing with a poverty population of their own as well. Their systems are not robust like ours are. And this is where, in 2016 here at IMANA, we took the initiative to work with the ministries inside of Jordan and say, hey, we can bring in medical teams and specialists and host primary care clinics throughout the northern areas of Jordan. And we've been doing that since 2016. All that is supported by the donations and the sadaqah and the zakat of the viewers. And I can't stress enough, you're hearing from Dr. Hamza al-Kateab, and you're going to hear more about some of his experiences, but the lack of healthcare for the refugees is something that is forgotten. I've mentioned that earlier, and I hope those are tuning in. Giving Tuesday is coming up here in the United States, that you consider donating, $5, $10, $100, or $1,000 towards this effort to help Syrian refugees around the world. Going back to the movie, something that I found poignant was early on, your wife, she talks about the unfortunate deaths of Omar and Gates. One was a medical student, the other was an architect. At that point, I believe you're not married yet. Had you already made the decision that you were not going to leave Aleppo, or were you because she mentioned that was a changing point for her in terms of this fight is real, or that we have to stay here, or I'm not exactly sure what she meant specifically, what changed her. Maybe you can answer that as well. But I wanted to know, because you stayed till the very end. You stayed until you were forced to leave, basically. For those who have not watched and those who've seen, the Russians called Dr. Hamza basically through the UN and said, either it's your life and your daughters and your wife's and everyone else who has remained to help these people, or we will give you access to leave. At that point you had to take that choice. You were forced. So going back to the question, what was that significant? Was that the significant point for you in terms of the hospital and healthcare?
I guess there are like this one was like, there are several like kind of important points, but this one was one of the most significant. Not only also like after Ghaith and Omar were killed, but also after an attack on Al-Quds hospital, when also about 52 people were killed at that attack, and including one pediatrician that was like responsible for the pediatric department at the hospital. It just like kind of basically like push us to continue the work that they were doing. It's kind of like you feel like if you just now like say I'll that's it, I can't handle it anymore, I'm gonna like leave or like shut down the hospital and that's it, then basically they were killed for nothing. And you feel also like day by day that the providing healthcare, it's not only become like kind of a concept of just like providing healthcare to patients, but it comes part of also the society and the community resilience. Without healthcare, like there will be no community be able to survive or to live in this area. And that's why like health facilities were one of the main targets of the regime and the Russian. So also like when you feel yourself like not only just providing healthcare, you're also providing more like resilience and support to the community, that they really want to stay home. They don't want to flee. They don't want to just to leave the area. And as I've mentioned also, like you don't want day by day and like more people we lost and are killed by the regime, don't want their death to be gone for nothing. And you feel like more responsible. And also like I want to stress like the relationship then became not like a doctor-patient relationship. It became literally like a relationship between the healthcare provider and the total community.
Wow, subhanallah. You know, going back to something that I found moving in the film was there was also periods of hope at times in there. There was what Wad talks about is where there was a mother who I think was come from one of the bombings, was brought in. She was 9 months pregnant, and they do the C-section, and it's so moving because being a physician myself, having been in the delivery room. The first time I watched it, I was like, this baby is not alive. I mean, they worked for so long, and then, subhanAllah, the baby cried. I mean, I was, it brought tears, like, and your wife beautifully said that there was still hope in all this. How, and this goes back to the resilience, like, how do, you're going through such death. I mean, there's death around you. You can smell death. I've been to certain parts of the world after earthquakes and tragedies, and you can smell the death. And how would you still find this hope? And is it going back to not leaving? Were these moments of hope what drove you? And then were there moments where you said, I need to leave? And then you came to your senses and said, no, I'm not. But were there times you questioned yourself why you're staying, but then a moment of hope would be positive reinforcement?
I guess, like, frankly speaking, I don't think like we've questioned like why, like, or regret why we were staying, or question like why we're there. There's some moment of like sometimes desperate or sadness that you can't really like win this battle when like you see the whole international community doing nothing, the whole governments in the world like know and knew and still knowing what's going on in Syria, and they're still like not interfering or doing nothing, and like they're still having like this kind of like communities to investigate who is responsible for attacking healthcare services, like healthcare facilities. Like you feel like sometimes, yeah, there are some desperate moments, but then like one more, like a thankful word from a child, or like like sometimes like when you meet then a child like after, or like a mother after a couple of years, and she said like, yeah, in 2013 I was injured, you treated me, and now like this is my 2 years like boy. That like give you the hope that life continues despite on everything. And like that moment of when we've done this CPR for the newborn, and like from physician to physician, I know that there are so many bad practices and wrong procedures we have done at that CPR, but like this is what we knew, this is what we weren't like experience enough, or have like the specialist to do it right. And then subhanallah, like the little boy just cried, and like that moment, will keep anyone there for another 5 years to live that moment again. You really like see the impact of the work that you're doing day by day. And as I said, like sometimes it's a small thing, like when a like 7 years old child are like is discharged from the hospital, and then he just like waited for an hour to say thank you for a doctor, and before leaving, that's something. Because basically, I guess, as you've mentioned, or I've mentioned before, like maybe here in the UK, healthcare is granted. Like, yes, we're thankful for all the doctors and all the healthcare providers, but usually it's just taken for granted. And like we've seen in COVID-19, for example, the gratitude by all the populations to the healthcare providers. And I guess this is like one of the like few moments when the healthcare providers felt themselves like appreciated by the population in Western countries. They usually like blamed for death, or blamed for wrong procedures, or for long queue, or whatever. But in COVID, because it's unusual situation, they really felt themselves appreciated by the population. We lived this feelings like in each hour we were spending in Syria. And also, like, I might be like insane to say that I really miss those days. Like if I was to choose, go back to siege Aleppo, or doing the master here now that I'm doing in the UK, safe with my family, I would definitely choose to go back there.
what would be the drive? I mean, now you have 2 daughters, a wife, a family. What would be driving you to go back to that risk and death, possibly death? I mean, it was pretty evident in the documentary. You barely survived. What is that driving force to go back?
Yes, living that those days when you like certainly realize that like I don't know how to say it in English, I know in Arabic, but like each person has like his written time to die, and like you can't just like basically change it. So through the whole conflict, I've seen people who are like frontline fighters, and they lived, and they now in other countries and doing they like continue their studies and all of that. And I've seen children that were killed. I've seen like people into the conflict, like in Aleppo, that were killed by heart attack, that were killed by like died because of a car accident. And like it just like you become more like believe in destiny, you become a bit more believe in fate. And I really said like if you would like if you weren't like kind of like judged that something wrong gonna happen with you, nothing wrong will happen to you. Still also believe in like when you do good, you will like God will treat you good. And I guess that's also like this belief make us like live through this year. And frankly speaking, if I like gonna die tomorrow, I prefer to die serving people most in need rather than dying here on my bed like in London. And I guess like it sounds complicated, but it's but also that easy. And as I said, like the value that you feel when you like serve like those people like are like really most in need, that's like that you can get like whenever like you whatever time you spend here studying or working, you feel like the value of the work you're doing.
Amazing. Again, for those who have just tuned in or are watching, speaking with Dr. Hamza al-Kateab, a Syrian pediatrician who lived through the siege of Aleppo, treated thousands of patients in a makeshift hospital. The documentary for Sama, tune in. It's on Amazon Prime. His wife, Wad, filmed it and produced it, and it's something amazing that I think each and every one of you need to, if you haven't watched it, to watch it. We as Americans, as Westerners, sometimes we catch glimpses of things on CNN and Fox and NBC, but we don't really truly understand what it's like, what life is like to be under this. And for Sama, brings you to, I think, as close as any of us will ever be to that. And something I think people don't understand, Dr. Hamza, is, I personally think the word refugee in modern times or in recent times, it's like a negative meaning almost. It's a negative, and I don't know. I wish I'm not a master of language. I wish I could think of a different word. I know it wasn't meant to have a negative connotation, but people here in the U.S. and other countries at times like, oh, they're a refugee. They feel bad for them. They feel pity for them. People don't realize these are people who are no different than you and I. They were physicians, lawyers, engineers, nurses, teachers, housewives. My experience in Jordan, I was surprised that everyone, they had the same dreams that I have for my daughter Zahra and my son Ibrahim, and that you have for your daughters, for Sama and Taima. To get an education, to live life, to come home and have dinner together. And overnight, it was completely changed. And that was something that drove us here at IMANA to go to Jordan when we saw the siege of Aleppo, and was like, we need to provide access to healthcare. We all have memorable patients through our times, and I'd love to hear your memorable patient, but I'll share you one of mine in my experience taking care of Syrian refugees. We were in Zarqa. It's a northern area in Jordan. It's a town basically full of Syrian refugees. And one of our translators, she herself was Syrian. she was, she was a pharmacist, I believe, and she was helping us in the pharmacy, and she knew English, and she was, just spectacular, taking care of the patients with us. And all of a sudden, she dropped right in front of me and had a major seizure, grand mal seizure. I mean, she was having a seizure. And, I immediately jumped on her. One of our emergency physicians put an IV in. We didn't have any Dilantin or phenytoin or anything. We're protecting the airway, doing all the things that we need to do. And finally, she came out. We got her to the hospital. And the other volunteer tells us, who's also a Syrian, a displaced individual there, and was like, she doesn't have money to buy. She's known to have epilepsy, and she doesn't have the money to purchase these medicines. Yet she was volunteering. She doesn't have food to feed herself and her family, and she was volunteering to help us here at IMANA take care of Syrian refugees. And that's one of the most memorable things that stuck with me. Immediately I shared that message and story with so many friends and family, and people donated and opened up their hearts and said, that we have to help those in need. As Americans, we pride ourselves on that, to helping others, and take some time and watch for someone, understand what we're appealing for, and maybe tune back later and go to our website and donate for our cause to help the Syrian refugees in Jordan. But going back to this memorable patient, I'm sure you've had many, but this was my experience that stuck with me from my one time going to Jordan to help Syrian refugees. What is one of your memorable patients?
So I had like like a memorable patient and like one incident that I always remember. One is too sad, one is happy. So I'll start with the sad one. I remember like during the siege, and we had one, like in one of the massacres, there was like, I can't remember the exact, like 7 or 9 years old boy, and his leg and foot was completely smashed, and it's clearly that it need to be like amputated. And I just like told one of the nurses, like, take him downstairs. It needs like to amputate the leg. And he like, through all the boy pain, he catch this word, and he understand what amputated mean, and he just start like to scream, please doctor, don't do it. Don't let them do this to me. I promise I'll be good. And this like really struck me, because that boy didn't understand what's going on, didn't understand why like he was injured and what wrong he has done, and he just had in mind that it's because something he has done wrong, and he was just like crying, begging us, please, I'll do good, and I won't like do anything wrong again. And I had to lie to him and say, like, don't worry, no, you misunderstood. I was talking about another patient, don't worry. But like, he went to the operation room, and then the operation done. I saw him when he was going out, and he just like looked at me, he said nothing, but it's clearly in his eye that like, why you lied to me and why you let them do this to me. And that was like the only procedure to save his life. I won't like forget this moment. I won't forget his look. I won't forget his begging to not do it. I won't forget like his frustration, doesn't understand what he has done wrong in order for this to happen to him. One of the other like incidents I remember, after the hospital was attacked and like kind of completely destroyed, we were receiving donations from NGOs in order to relocate the hospital, and like we received like a huge like generous donations. But one of the main, like, suddenly one person came and he gave me 100,000 Syrian pounds, which is about $500, which like in reconstruction point of view, or like medical devices point of view, basically is nothing, this $500. But then he said, like, this is from the neighborhood, or the neighbors of the hospital has collected this money. And he said, like, it's not from one person, this is like from like so many families that they put this money in order for you like to really credit the hospital because we really need you. And I literally cried that time. It was one of like, when you see like the community basically like gathering money in order to support the hospital in whatever they could. So as you've mentioned, like in the beginning, like any donation, $5, $10 will help. This like total $500 that might be like gathered dollar by dollar from many families, that meant like a lot than any donation that we have received from any NGOs or from any like government. And that's like part of the resilience you've spoken about by the Syrian community, whether like inside or outside of Syria, that explain like this attitude from this girl that we're translating for you. So despite like those people were living in a conflict area, despite that they need this money to relocate themselves or like to prepare repair their houses, they donate to the hospital. And this girl also, despite like her difficulties and her illness, she also like, I didn't ask you for money. She just like basically volunteered
Wow.
to help the resilience of the community.
Amazing. We're coming close to an end here. And wow, I mean, Dr. Hamza, I don't know if you see it or not, we've already raised $13,000 in this short hour. Again, we here at IMANA, we send medical teams to Amman, Jordan, multiple times a year. We're going to be starting back up after this COVID hiatus. We're working with the Ministry of Health in Jordan. We also do cataract surgeries for Syrian refugees in Amman, Jordan, and helping them. Imagine your child not having his inhaler for his asthma. Imagine your grandfather not being able to get his diabetes medicines or hypertension medicines. Things we take very, sometimes people think like these missions, you're not doing that much because we're not doing what you were doing, Dr. Hamza, in the operating room, saving those lives. But what people, I think, forget is the people who have been forced to leave, they're still dying because of lack of health care. They may not be dying from a bullet or a bomb or a cluster bomb, but people are dying because they don't have access to dialysis. They don't have access to anti-glycemic medicines. They don't have access to their blood pressure medicines. And I still think these people will never be in the total count of casualties from the war because we don't think of it that way. But these are deaths that continue. And, take your time and open your wallets and your checkbooks and your hearts and, donate today to IMANA to help save these lives. I do have to close with one question. The movie was made and dedicated to your daughter for Sama. To me, as I watched it, I felt Sama was representative not of just being your daughter. She was like, in a way that she was the representing all of the Syrian children, all of the children of Syria. And what is your hope for Sama as representing the children of Syria for a future? I'd love to hear that from you and what your hope is as someone who has been through death and destruction and devastation and seen two of your children born under siege. What is for Sama as representative Syrian children?
So as you've said, like it, like even when like Wad was working on the documentary, it wasn't in the beginning like as it ends. It wasn't named for Sama or like how it is. But at one point, like maybe after 1 year of editing, herself and the other director, they just like said like basically all this struggle and everything happened is for the next generation. It was for Sama and like all the other children. And then the documentary was made the edited basically the way everyone has seen it. And we hope that to basically to save the narrative for the next generation, we hope that when Sama grew up and like after 10 years and she wants to know where she come from and what happened in Syria, she's not just like, overwhelmed by the fake news and the misinformation about Syria. She won't be like sad because she's a Syrian refugee. She won't be kind of has like this stigma about being a refugee. Unfortunately, in this like war, like we're in 2020, and yet like a lot of politicians and a lot of media make a demons out of refugees. Hopefully, like when she see the film and the next generation see the film, understand that it wasn't a civil war. It wasn't like Syrians fighting each other. It was a revolution against the dictatorship regime, and the world were just watching. And that's why like people then became refugees. Hopefully, like we can face this fake news and face this misinformation by this documentary and all the other media reports and the old like brave citizen journalists that are still in Syria reporting the reality. Also, like by thankful to like other like organizations and volunteers like yourselves. Just amazing. As I said, I like literally like the beginning of you introduction me when you said like Hamza is now a refugee in the UK, and then you immediately said like, which is something that he doesn't want to. Like it's I'm like, yes, I'm grateful for the UK government for having me, but I'm like it's not the dream. No refugee dreams to become a refugee. If you ask all the 6 million refugee all over the globe, and asked like when they were 18, what is your future? What you want to be in the future? No one of them gonna say, oh, I just dream to become a refugee in the US, or I dream to become a refugee in Germany. No one would say that. But unfortunately, like their dreams were stolen and crushed by the violence, by the terror of the dictatorship regime, and now they become a refugee. Hopefully, they will remember this story and this fact and tell it to the children, and like one day, accountability and justice happen.
Absolutely. We're come to an end. Just something you reminded me, when we do the cataract surgeries on the Syrian patients in Jordan, quite often, there's our elderly patients, people who can't see any longer, and immediately, you can see after cataract surgery, and their response would be is that they would hug us, they would cry, they would thank us and the donors from the United States who made this possible, and then they would pray to God that now that they have vision, that they can see a free Syria. I pray with you and all of us that you return to a free Syria. I hope one day that maybe I can join you in Syria and at your home and have kibbeh with you, as we saw our wonderful chef Nick put together a delicious dish. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you, Dr. Hamza. I want you to give my regards to your family. We wish you well. And for all of those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. Please remember, Giving Tuesday is coming up. We were just thankful on Thanksgiving for everything that we've been given. And you've heard the stories from Dr. Hamza al-Kateab about things and circumstances that they would wish upon no one. And we here at IMANA are trying to help the people of Syria who are displaced by providing them health care. Take your time to open up your wallets, your checkbooks, and your credit cards on this Giving Tuesday and donate to IMANA. Thank you, everyone, and we'll tune in again for Travel with Your Taste Buds next week. Thank you.